that America has been taken advantage of for too long,
Right.
and that it's time to prioritize our own interests.
But is that really the best way to make America great again?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, haven't we historically been at our strongest
Yeah,
when we've led through partnerships and collaboration?
that's a key question. And it's one that's being fiercely debated right now.
Uh-huh.
There are valid arguments on both sides.
Okay.
On the one hand,
Yeah.
you have those who believe that America needs to stand up for itself and stop apologizing for its power.
Okay.
On the other hand,
Yeah.
you have those who believe that true leadership lies in building bridges,
Right.
not walls.
It seems like the president is betting on the former.
Yeah, it seems that way.
But what about the economic policies he outlined?
Right.
Do those actually deliver on this promise of prosperity for all Americans?
Well, that's where things get a little complicated. Remember those common sense initiatives he talked about?
Yeah.
Deregulation,
Right.
tax cuts,
Uh-huh.
bringing back manufacturing.
He made it sound pretty straightforward.
He did.
Cut taxes,
Mm-hmm.
create jobs,
Yeah,
boost the economy.
right. But the responses from Bernie Sanders and that female politician suggested it's not that simple.
What do they say?
Well, they argue that those policies primarily benefit the wealthy and corporations,
Mhm.
while doing little to address the economic realities faced by working families.
So it's like two completely different visions
It is.
of how the economy works and
Yeah.
who benefits from
Right. One focused on trickle-down economics,
it. Uh-huh.
the other on a more equitable distribution of wealth.
And that's reflected in the specific policies they advocate for.
Absolutely. The president is all about deregulation and tax cuts,
Yeah.
while his critics are pushing for things like raising the minimum wage,
Yes, sir.
strengthening social safety nets, and ensuring access to affordable healthcare and education.
It really boils down to a fundamental question.
It does,
What is the role of government in the economy?
right? Should it prioritize creating a favorable environment for businesses
Okay.
or directly support individuals and families?
And that's a debate that goes beyond just economics.
Yeah, for sure.
It touches on,
Right.
deeply held values
Mm-hmm.
and beliefs about fairness,
Yeah.
opportunity,
Uh-huh.
and what the American dream really means.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean for the average person?
Right.
I mean, how do these competing visions actually play out in their daily lives?
That's what we need to explore further. We need to look beyond the rhetoric
Okay.
and examine the potential consequences of these policies.
All right, let's do that. Let's dive into those potential consequences.
Okay.
And maybe, just maybe,
Yeah,
we can help our listener make sense of this complex
absolutely.
and ever-changing political landscape.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much we've already uncovered, just by diving into this presidential address.
Yeah.
But now comes the really important part.
Right.
Figuring out what all of this means
Yeah.
for everyday people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've talked about the grand visions,
Right.
the
Yeah.
bold statements, the contrasting viewpoints.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it all comes down to, how these policies
Right.
and these ideas translate into real-world impacts.
Mhm.
So let's start with the economic side of things.
Okay.
The president talked a lot about bringing back manufacturing jobs,
Yeah.
cutting taxes,
Right.
deregulation.
Yeah.
But his critics argue that, those policies mainly benefit the wealthy and corporations.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we reconcile those two perspectives?
Well, it's important to look beyond the sound bites
Yeah.
and actually examine the potential consequences.
Okay.
Let's take deregulation, for example.
Okay.
Reducing regulations can certainly create a more, favorable environment for
Yeah.
businesses.
Right.
But it can also lead to weaker consumer protections,
Okay.
environmental damage,
Uh-huh.
even financial instability.
So it's a bit of a trade-off.
It is.
Short-term gains for businesses,
Yeah,
but potential long-term risks for everyone else.
exactly. And when it comes to tax cuts, the question is, who benefits the most?
Right.
Critics argue that this idea trickle-down economics,
Okay.
this idea that tax cuts for the wealthy will somehow stimulate the economy and benefit everyone, just doesn't work.
Uh-huh.
They point to decades of evidence suggesting that these policies actually tend to exacerbate income inequality.
So you're saying that instead of trickling down,
Right.
the wealth stays concentrated at the top,
Yeah.
and that regular people might not see much benefit.
That's the argument.
If
And it's something you need to consider, as you evaluate these economic policies.
Right.
What are the potential benefits?
Right.
And for whom? What are the potential risks?
Yeah.
And how might they impact your own financial well-being?
That makes sense. It's all about weighing the pros and cons,
It
right?
is.
But let's shift gears a bit
Right.
and talk about some of those social issues
Right.
that were such a huge part of the address.
Yeah.
Protecting children,
Mm-hmm.
combating illegal immigration,
Right.
traditional values.
Yeah.
These are all topics that resonate with a lot of people.
They do. And the president clearly understands the power of emotional appeals. Using stories and rhetoric to kind of evoke these strong feelings
Yeah.
of fear, anger, even hope.
Right, like the story about Peyton McNabb
Exactly.
and the transgender athlete,
Mm.
or the victims of crimes committed by illegal immigrants.
Right.
These stories paint a very specific picture
They do.
of the threats facing America
Yeah,
and the need for decisive action.
absolutely. And it's important to recognize the persuasive power of these narratives.
Yeah.
But it's equally important to consider alternative perspectives
Okay.
and challenge assumptions.
So, for example, when it comes to the ban on transgender athletes in women's sports,
Right.
we need to also think about the rights and the well-being of transgender individuals,
For sure.
not just the fears of some parents.
Exactly. And when we talk about illegal immigration, we need to acknowledge the complexities of the issue.
Okay.
Yes, there are legitimate concerns about crime and border security,
Right.
but we also need to consider the economic contributions of immigrants,
Yeah.
the humanitarian crisis at the border, and the need for comprehensive immigration reform.
It's about seeing the whole picture, right?
Always.
Not just the narrow slice that's being presented to us.
Exactly. And that same principle applies to the president's call to ban sex changes for minors.
Okay.
He frames it as, protecting children from harmful ideologies,
Yeah.
but critics argue that it's based on misinformation and prejudice, denying transgender youth access to necessary medical care.
It's a complicated issue for sure.
It is.
And it highlights how deeply divided we are as a nation
Yeah,
on these, social and cultural questions.
absolutely. But what about the foreign policy front?
Right.
The president laid out this pretty bold vision
He did.
of American strength and dominance.
Yeah. How does that fit into today's world?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
Can America reclaim its position as the sole superpower
Right.
in a world that's becoming increasingly multipolar?
Yeah.
And is an America First approach really the best way to navigate the complexities of globalization?
I mean, he talked about reclaiming the Panama Canal,
Right.
building this massive missile defense shield,
Yeah.
even hinting at Greenland becoming a state.
Uh-huh.
It all sounds pretty ambitious,
It does.
even a little bit far-fetched.
Yeah, and it raises some serious questions
Like what?
about the feasibility and the potential consequences of these policies.
Okay.
Reclaiming the Panama Canal, for example, would likely trigger a major international crisis.
Yeah.
It could even lead to military conflict.
It sounds like a move that would alienate allies
It could.
and embolden adversaries.
Exactly. And then there's the question of whether this focus on military strength actually addresses the most pressing threats
Right.
that America faces today.
Okay.
Cyber attacks,
Huh.
climate change,
Yeah.
pandemics.
These are global challenges
We are.
that require cooperation,
Yes.
not just military might.
It's like he's fighting the last war
Yeah.
instead of preparing for the future.
And that's where the responses from Bernie Sanders and that female politician offer kind of a different perspective.
Right. They argue that true American leadership lies not in isolationism or aggression,
Okay.
but in building a more just and equitable world order where everyone has a chance to thrive.
It's a very different vision.
It is.
One based on cooperation and diplomacy
Yeah.
rather than confrontation and dominance.
Absolutely.
So where does all of this leave us?
Right.
What are the key takeaways
Yeah.
from this deep dive?
I think the most important takeaway is this.
Okay.
Be critical.
Uh-huh.
Be informed
Yeah.
and be engaged.
Okay.
Don't just accept what you hear at face value.
Right.
Dig deeper,
Yeah.
challenge assumptions, and
Mhm.
consider different perspectives.
And most importantly, think about how these policies and these ideas might impact your own life,
Absolutely.
your community,
Yeah.
and the world around you.
Because ultimately, the future of America is shaped by the choices we make, both individually and collectively.
Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey.
Yeah, this was a good one.
Until next time, keep diving deep.